My dismissal came swiftly. The termination papers pushed across the highly polished mahogany conference table by Brian, a man who embodied corporate ambition. He spoke of needing more driven employees, capable of surpassing ever higher sales targets. The firm, he explained, was charting a dramatically new course. My name is David Miller, 47 years of age, and I had dedicated 9 years to Trivana Corporation in Springfield, Illinois, as a senior account executive. Over that decade, I had meticulously cultivated a client portfolio generating nearly 35% of the company's total revenue. This success wasn't achieved through shortcuts, but through long hours, relentless travel, and the forging of relationships built upon unwavering trust. I offered a polite smile, expressed my gratitude for the opportunity, and departed without protest. Brian Ellsworth, our newly appointed Vice President of Sales, had arrived 6 months prior, handpicked by CEO Edward Collins, to revitalize the sales force. He sported bespoke suits, liberally sprinkled his conversations with cliches about motivation, and yet had never once accompanied me on a client visit. Within 3 weeks of his arrival, he'd implemented a revised commission structure that reduced my compensation by 18%, despite my consistently exceeding expectations. The warning signs were subtle but unmistakable. My workspace had been relocated to an obscure corner during office renovations. My name was conspicuously absent from meeting invitations. The IT department had been observed servicing my computer during my lunch break. These seemingly minor incidents, individually insignificant, collectively signaled an impending change. Family photos, a coffee mug lovingly painted by my daughter, and a separate folder containing client contact information not included in the company's database. It was simply a matter of habit. "Need any assistance with that?" Valerie from accounting inquired, her expression genuine confusion. "Are you changing offices?" "Something like that," I responded, avoiding a potential confrontation. Descending in the elevator, I found myself next to Mr. Collins. He offered a cursory nod, eyes glued to his phone, oblivious to Brian's actions and their impending impact on quarterly performance forecasts. That obliviousness would soon evaporate. Walking to my vehicle, I felt no anger, only an unsettling clarity, like awakening from a prolonged, comfortable dream to find the house I'd inhabited was never truly mine. The drive home was silent, no phone calls, no radio, only introspection focused on the upcoming day. My phone vibrated as I pulled into my driveway. It was Thomas Carter, my most significant client. Our annual contract renewal was scheduled for the following week. His text message pertained to dinner reservations during his upcoming visit to town. He remained unaware of the recent events. I placed the phone on the kitchen counter, unanswered, and gazed out the window, contemplating 9 years of client relationships built on my integrity and dependability. Brian hadn't just terminated an employee, he had severed the crucial link connecting Trivana to millions of dollars in revenue, and he was entirely unaware of the magnitude of his actions. I had joined Trivana, then Midwestern Financial Services, before its rebranding and relocation to its modern downtown office. Collins himself had hired me, directly from a competing firm where, despite consistently meeting targets, I'd been overlooked for promotion. "I need someone who intimately understands this market," he'd stated. "Someone clients trust implicitly." For 7 years his assessment proved accurate. I expanded our client base from regional enterprises to national corporations, extending contracts from annual agreements to 3- and 5-year terms. I secured Lockhart Manufacturing, luring them away from our chief rival, and added Henderson Group when many believed the endeavor was impossible. My wife Susan jokingly remarked that I was more devoted to my clients than to her. "Thursday night dinner with the Millers again?" she'd inquire, already anticipating my response. The children grew accustomed to my absence from their sporting events and school recitals. "Dad's working" became their accepted reality. I assured them it would all be worthwhile someday. 3 promotions, 2 office expansions, and 1 recession later, Trivana had transformed from a $4 million operation into a $32 million enterprise, with my accounts contributing approximately $1 million to that growth. It wasn't until Brian's arrival that anyone precisely calculated the actual percentage. The first warning signal emerged during a quarterly performance review, 3 months after Brian's assumption of the sales leadership role. "Your client acquisition rate has stagnated," he announced, pointing to a chart revealing I'd only added 1 new client that quarter. "I'm focused on cultivating and strengthening existing relationships," I explained. "The Lockhart contract recently doubled. The future lies in securing new business," Brian countered. "We require hunters, not cultivators." A week later, my executive assistant, Jessica, was reassigned. The following month, my travel requests necessitated additional approval. My expense reports were subjected to increased scrutiny. It was a slow, insidious erosion, death by 1,000 minor cuts. I began hearing whispers of promising new talent being interviewed. Young MBAs with bold proposals but lacking industry experience. Brian referred to them as disruptors. Last month he hired Alexandra Reed, a 28-year-old from a technology startup. Within her first week, she was assigned to accompany me on a call with Thomas Carter. No explanation, no formal introduction, just an apparent apprenticeship. Mr. Carter noticed. Following the call, he texted, "Who's the new associate? Are you being replaced?" I dismissed it as simple team expansion. Yet that evening, driving home, I felt a profound shift in my intuition. The unshakable certainty born from years of discerning boardroom dynamics and client expressions. Something felt profoundly wrong. I should have trusted that feeling earlier. I set my cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured myself a generous measure of bourbon. The house was empty. Susan was visiting her parents in Denver for the week. Perhaps it was for the best. I needed solitude. I accessed my personal phone, scrolling through my contacts. 9 years of relationships, encompassing over 200 clients, vendors and industry connections. Individuals who trusted me to manage their businesses effectively. People who had chosen Trivana because of me, not the corporate marketing or the impressive downtown office. My company phone, now deactivated and safely stored in the box, contained only formal communications. The informal dinner invitations, golf outings, and personal contact numbers of CEOs and key decision-makers were all on my personal device, information accumulated by being someone people desired to work with. A strange calm settled over me. No panic. No desperate worries about mortgage payments or health insurance. Just a clear understanding of what had transpired, and what lay ahead. The bourbon burned as it went down. 9 years of 60-hour work weeks, missed family dinners, and neglected Little League games. 9 years of building something I believed was mine, only to discover it wasn't. I opened my laptop and reviewed my employment contract. The non-compete clause existed, but its scope was limited. 1 year, and applicable only if I resigned voluntarily. Termination altered the equation. There were no legal impediments to taking my clients elsewhere. My phone buzzed again. Thomas Carter. Dinner reservation confirmed for Thursday. The text message read, "Looking forward to discussing the renewal." I stared at the message for an extended period. Thomas Carter represented $1.8 million in annual business for Trivana. His company Lockhart Manufacturing had been a client of mine for 7 years, preceded by 3 years at my previous firm, nearly a decade of trust. And he wasn't alone. Henderson Group, Westfield Properties, Carlton Industries. Together, they accounted for another $1.6 million in annual revenue. All had contract renewals approaching within the next month. All interacted exclusively through me. I placed my glass down and reached a decision. I wouldn't contact anyone that night. No angry emails, no threats. I would sleep on it, wake up with a clear mind, and then make precisely 3 phone calls, not to complain or express grievances, but simply to inform my closest clients that my employment with Trivana had ended, effective immediately. The rest would follow naturally. I retrieved the family photos from the box. My daughter's graduation, my son's wedding, the Yellowstone trip we'd almost canceled due to a client emergency. I'd missed too much already. Tomorrow I would begin making different choices. I finished my bourbon and ascended to bed in the quiet house. For the first time in years I didn't set an alarm. No early flights. No quarterly forecasts to review before dawn. Only the quiet assurance that Brian Ellsworth had made a catastrophic blunder. And I needed to do nothing more than stand back and watch it unfold. I made my 3 calls the following morning. No drama, just facts. "Thomas, I'm no longer with Trivana as of yesterday. I wanted you to hear it directly from me." His response was immediate. "What happened? Who's handling our account now?" "Brian Ellsworth will likely contact you, or perhaps Alexandra Reed." A prolonged pause. "That woman from the meeting, she doesn't understand our business. That's all I can tell you. The decision is yours." Similar conversations ensued with James Henderson and Peter Carlton. No suggestions, no recruitment pitches, just information conveyed with the consistent reliability they'd come to expect. By midday, my personal phone was incessantly buzzing. Other clients had heard the news. The industry was tightly knit. At 2 p.m. Mr. Collins called. I allowed it to go to voicemail. "David, This is Edward. We need to discuss your departure. Several clients are voicing concerns. Please return my call immediately. I didn't. Instead, I drove downtown to meet with Ronald Hayes, a lawyer specializing in employment law. I'd assisted his son secure financing for a restaurant 3 years ago. He owed me a favor. They can't prevent you from working, Ronald confirmed, after reviewing my termination documents. But they'll attempt to dissuade your clients from following you. Be prepared for that. By 4 p.m., Trivana's legal department had emailed a reminder regarding confidentiality obligations. By 5 p.m., Brian had texted, "Let's discuss your severance package. There might be opportunities for consulting work."
Too late.
Thomas, just concluded a call with your CEO and that VP who fired you. They promised continuity, stating Alexandra would personally manage everything. Then they offered a 10% discount on renewal. What did you tell them? I asked. That I'd consider it. I said nothing. Thomas continued. I've sent notice terminating our contract, citing a change in relationship management. Henderson and Carlton had done the same. Still, I remained silent. David, where are you going to work? Because wherever that is, that's where our business is going. That night, 3 more companies from my portfolio sent termination notices to Trivana. By morning, the total reached 7, representing over $3 million in contracts. Mr. Collins called an emergency board meeting. I learned this from Jessica, my former assistant, via text. Complete chaos here. Brian's trying to blame you for client tampering. The CEO's questioning why no one foresaw this. My phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. David Miller, I answered. This is Robert Gregory and Associates. A competitor, a smaller firm, but with a superior reputation. I understand you're available, and several of our mutual acquaintances speak highly of you. I'm listening. Senior Vice President position, a 6-figure signing bonus, complete autonomy to manage your accounts, and a seat on our executive committee. When would you like to start? How about tomorrow? I accepted immediately. Not out of desperation, but because it perfectly aligned with my aspirations, respect, autonomy, and recognition of the value I brought. That afternoon, Brian texted again. The board approved a retention package, your full salary for 6 months plus stock options. Just help us transition your clients. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. They'd had 9 years to value what I had built. Now they were attempting to assign a price to it retroactively. Too little, far too late. 1 week into my new role at Gregory and Associates, Jessica called from her personal number. You need to know what happened, she said. It wasn't just Brian wanting his own people. I sat in my new office, larger than my previous one at Trivana, and listened as 9 years of history were reassembled into a clearer narrative. They were planning to sell the firm, Jessica explained. Apex Capital made an offer 2 months ago, but with stipulations. They wanted to bring in their own account managers for the major clients, integrate them with their existing portfolio companies. The pieces fell into place. Brian hadn't been hired to increase sales. He'd been brought in to transition clients away from me, transforming them into company assets rather than relationships tied to a single executive. My termination wasn't about underperformance. It was preparation for an acquisition. How do you know this? I asked. I'm still assigned to the executive suite. I see the documents, hear the conversations. Yesterday they withdrew the offer. Apex won't buy without the client base you built. After we hung up, I sat silently for a considerable time. 9 years of loyalty, and they had been willing to sever my connection to my clients as if removing an unnecessary intermediary. Not because I had failed, but because I had succeeded too well. The relationships were too robust, too personal. They needed me gone before the clients could be repackaged as corporate assets. I opened my laptop and checked my email. More former clients had reached out. The industry buzzed with the news. David Miller had joined Gregory and Associates, and clients were following. Trivana stock had plummeted 10% in 4 days. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Collins. Can we meet? Just you and me. No lawyers. I didn't respond immediately. The deeper betrayal settled in my stomach like cold lead. Not just fired, but deliberately sacrificed as part of a corporate power play. I picked up the phone and called Thomas Carter. I need to ask you something, I said. Did Trivana attempt to introduce you to anyone from Apex Capital in the last few months? A pause. How did you know? They brought in a fellow named William during our quarterly review, said he was a strategic advisor assessing our industry. He asked many questions about our future needs. Confirmation. They had been parading Apex representatives before my clients, laying the groundwork for a transition, all while I remained employed, still believing I was building something significant. Further calls revealed a similar pattern. Behind my back, meetings were scheduled, information gathered, relationships probed for vulnerabilities or areas where I might be deemed expendable. By the end of the day, I confirmed that at least 5 of my major accounts had been surreptitiously introduced to Apex representatives, all under the guise of strategic advisors or industry consultants. I finally texted Mr. Collins back. No meeting necessary. I fully understand the Apex situation. His response arrived swiftly. It was a business decision, David. Nothing personal. But it was personal. 9 years of cultivating relationships, of knowing clients' children's names and vacation destinations, of answering calls on weekends and holidays, all reduced to an impediment to a corporate transaction. I closed my laptop and gazed at the Springfield skyline from my new office. The view was different here, somehow clearer. Gregory and Associates had already signed contracts with 10 of my former clients, representing nearly $4.5 million in annual revenue, and more were on the way. Not because I was actively recruiting them, but because in this business, trust followed individuals, not logos or corporate strategies. Trivana hadn't merely lost a salesperson. They'd lost the bedrock upon which their growth was founded, and they still didn't fully grasp why. Cultivating client loyalty in a transactional marketplace. The irony wasn't lost on me. I accepted, not for ego or publicity, but because I knew who would be in attendance: industry colleagues, potential clients, and most importantly, Trivana's remaining leadership team. Mr. Collins never missed this conference. Neither did the board members. Meanwhile, Gregory and Associates had provided resources Trivana had never offered: 2 dedicated analysts, marketing support, and most significantly, equity partnership. Every client I brought in wasn't just commission. It was building something I partly owned. I spent a month preparing for the conference, not with flashy presentations or memorized anecdotes, but with data. Working late nights with my analysts, I compiled performance metrics for every client who had followed me from Trivana to Gregory and Associates. The results were irrefutable. Average service response time had decreased by 48%. Implementation costs were down 27%. Client satisfaction scores had risen by 19 points. It wasn't just about me. It was about demonstrating what happened when companies prioritized relationships over transactions. On the morning of the conference, I reviewed my notes one last time. No dramatic revelations. No finger-pointing. Just facts and outcomes. Professional. Measured. Devastating. As I entered the hotel ballroom, I spotted Mr. Collins immediately, conversing with 2 board members near the coffee station. His expression tightened when he saw me. I nodded politely and proceeded. The panel discussion began with standard inquiries about market trends and technological disruption. When my turn came, I spoke directly about what clients truly valued. In an era of automation and digitization, personal accountability has become the scarcest commodity, I stated. Companies frequently mistake client relationships for company assets. They aren't. They are trust agreements between individuals requiring continuous reinforcement. I presented my data without mentioning Trivana by name, offering case studies of clients who had switched firms and experienced immediate improvements. The lesson isn't about retention packages or contractual obligations, I concluded. It's about recognizing that when you treat relationship managers as interchangeable components, clients will demonstrate precisely how flawed that assumption is. During the question and answer session, an audience member, a young analyst I didn't recognize, posed the question everyone was pondering. Isn't your recent move from Trivana to Gregory and Associates, along with several key clients, precisely the scenario companies fear when considering how much autonomy to grant relationship managers? The room fell silent. I could feel Mr. Collins' gaze fixed upon me from across the room. That's a valid question, I responded. But consider the alternative. Trivana lost those clients not because I took them, but because they failed to comprehend what those clients truly valued. No one followed me out of mere personal loyalty. They followed because their needs were consistently better addressed through my service approach, an approach my former employer decided was no longer aligned with their strategic direction. I paused, making brief eye contact with Mr. Collins. Every company has the right to alter its course, and every client has the right to determine whether that new direction serves their interests. The marketplace is ruthlessly efficient in that regard. After the panel, 2 more former Trivana clients approached me. By the conference's conclusion, Gregory and Associates had signed letters of intent with 4 new accounts, representing another $2 million in annual revenue. That evening, I checked the financial news. Trivana had announced a restructuring. Brian Ellsworth was seeking other opportunities. The Apex acquisition was officially defunct. Their stock had declined another 7%. I closed my laptop without a hint of satisfaction or triumph, only the quiet assurance that comes from being proven right in the most decisive manner possible, by the market itself. The lesson had been delivered. Whether they learned from it was no longer my concern. $7.8 million in new business, 65% from former Trivana clients. Robert Gregory himself raised a glass. To the most successful acquisition we've ever made. And we didn't even have to purchase a company to achieve it. Polite laughter filled the room. I smiled but didn't partake in the merriment. This wasn't a celebration for me. It was validation. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Trivana Corp announces CEO transition. Edward Collins steps down amid persistent revenue challenges. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without drawing attention. Some victories don't require an audience. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Alexandra Reed. The young woman Brian had attempted to install as my replacement. I've been let go along with most of the sales team. Any chance Gregory and Associates is hiring? I forwarded it to HR with a note. Worth interviewing. Not her fault what happened. As I was departing the office, my assistant handed me an envelope that had been delivered by courier. Inside was a handwritten note from Edward Collins. You were right. I prioritize transactions over relationships. It cost the company everything. If you're ever inclined to meet for coffee, I would appreciate the opportunity to apologize in person. I folded the note and placed it in my jacket pocket. Maybe someday. Not yet. That evening, driving home, I passed Trivana's building. The sign was being removed from the facade. The local business journal had reported they were downsizing to a smaller office in the suburbs. I didn't slow down. Didn't take a photograph. Just drove on, my gaze fixed on the future I was building on my own terms. 1 year to the day after Brian had slid those termination papers across the conference table, I signed the final documents making me a full partner at Gregory and Associates. The firm had expanded by 30% since my arrival. My client portfolio now represented nearly $18 million in annual revenue. I closed the folder containing the partnership agreement and looked out my office window at the Springfield skyline. The same buildings. The same city. But everything else had changed. Susan entered with 2 cups of coffee. Signed the papers officially. I nodded. Signed officially. She sat across from me, studying my face. You don't look as happy as I expected. Just thinking, I replied. About Trivana. She shook her head. About what I'm building here. About doing it right this time. That morning I had approved the hiring of 3 new account managers, all with the same profit-sharing structure I'd negotiated for myself. No one would build something here only to have it taken away. That was my first act as a partner. My phone buzzed. Thomas Carter. Heard about the partnership. Congratulations. Knew you'd land on your feet. Thanks to clients like you. No, he corrected. Thanks to you being who you are. We just followed the value. After we hung up, I picked up the framed quote Susan had given me last Christmas. A simple inscription on parchment paper. The best revenge is massive success. I placed it back on the credenza face down. That chapter was closed. I retrieved my calendar and scheduled lunch with Edward Collins. Not to gloat, not to dwell on the past, but because sometimes the final step in moving forward is releasing the weight of what transpired before. I shut down my computer, grabbed my keys, and walked out to meet Susan. We had tickets to our son's band performance. Something I wouldn't have made time for in my previous life. Some losses pave the way for greater victories. Some fires purge what needs to be eliminated. I'd never been more certain of that than I was today.